Good morning, everybody. So today I'm going to give a little talk on different aspects of the Dantian, both for Qigong and for Tai Chi. But before we get going with that, let's do a little warm-up with the stick. Lee circles. And reverse. And shoe circles. And reverse. And pink circles. And reverse. And reverse. And block. Okay, you can put away your sticks. Okay, today we are going to talk about the Dantian. And I'm going to put a little signal on my body here to indicate the Dantian. It's right below the navel. So my navel is here, right? The Dantian is like 2 fingers underneath the navel. And if you press into that point, you should feel something. So the Dantian is only one of a number of Dantians inside the body, especially for Tai Chi and Qigong. We're going to especially look at the Dantians that are on the center line of the body. And some folks equate the Dantians with the chakras in the Hindu tradition. There are similarities, there are differences, so I'm going to use them kind of interchangeably, but you need to understand they're not exactly the same thing. They're kind of pointing toward different functions of the energy organs themselves. So the chakras, how many chakras are there? Catherine, do you know the 7 major chakras, right? No?
No, 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 sorry.
Okay. So I'm going to explain them to you and pay attention to these because the same holds true for the Dantians. There's a tradition in the Taoist way of looking at things that you actually have 144,000 Dantians inside the body. But we're only going to look at 7 of those. 7 are the most important. And they line up on the center line of the body, as everything else does. And you can think of these as energy centers. So they begin at the root of the spine and they work all the way up to the end of the spine, the top of the skull. And they are the root chakra at the perineum. So between the anus and the genitals, where the spine stops, all right, that's the root chakra. The second chakra is your sexual chakra. The third chakra is what we call the Dantian, so the belly chakra. The fourth chakra, depending on the system that you look at, is either the Kevin, what am I looking for? The
Sternum, xiphoid process, heart.
no, come on, the energy center here. All right, the heart. I actually don't focus on the heart that much because the heart's busy doing things, and I think for the most part you should leave the heart alone. All right. The fifth chakra is the throat. The sixth chakra is the third eye, and the seventh chakra is the crown chakra, so the top of the head. All right, and each of those in the Chinese system has a particular name. The 3 that we're going to look at particularly are the root chakra, which is called the Hui Yin. The Hui Yin means the meeting of the yin lines. So the yin lines come up the leg on the inside of the leg, all right, to the Hui Yin, and then there's another yin line that goes up and down the front of the body. So there's 3 yin lines that meet at the perineum. That's the Hui Yin. Then there's the Dantian proper, and then the crown chakra is the Ba Hui. And the Ba Hui is not exactly on the top of the head, it's just a little bit back from the top of the head. And you can think of that as the ending of the spine up there. The skull, the skull is actually an evolved vertebrae. So the skull is actually part of the spine. All right. So what we're going to pay attention to today is the third chakra. The difference between the Hindu way of looking at things and the Taoist way of looking at things, I'm not sure it's really real, but the basic way of looking at it is in the Chinese way, they look at the Dantian as a storehouse of energy. All right, so this is where you store your energy. In the Hindu way of looking at it, it's a doorway. It's a doorway into another dimension. Personally, I think it's both of those things. All right, and as we go along, I'll explain why. So those 7 chakras or 7 dantians up and down the spine all interact with each other. So some of you may have heard of Kundalini exercises or Kundalini energy. Yes? Kevin, my 2 Kevins, have you guys heard of Kundalini? All right. Catherine, have you heard of Kundalini? All right. So Kundalini energy is a biological energy that is spiraled around the root chakra at first. So you can think of it as a potential energy. All right? If the Kundalini energy is activated, what can happen is that it will run up the spine to the crown chakra. All right? I've had that experience. Most people work on their Kundalini through Kundalini exercises. I didn't. I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. For many people, that's actually very difficult. Because when it happens, it's quite something. All right? It's like a waterfall working in reverse. It's going up, all the way up. So when this happened to me at age 29, it was like something began to happen down here. And suddenly it just rushed up to my head, to my brain, and it causes a kind of mental awakening. And then what happened is it went down to my Dantian proper. And the Dantian proper, in my own experience, just swelled. Now, I knew nothing about Dantians. I really knew nothing about chakras. I knew nothing about any of this stuff. It just happened spontaneously. So when I say it swelled, in my mind, in my feelings, it swelled up to about the size of a basketball, and it was bright red. And these feelings went on for about 2 weeks or so. And it was a very interesting experience. It's related to what they call the Enlightenment experience. But keep in mind that the Enlightenment experience is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of something. All right? So it doesn't mark your ascension to any level. It marks the beginning of something.
How can you account for this happening to you? What is there any way to explain why then?
Yes, I know exactly why. I know exactly why. All right, I'll explain it to you because I've thought about this this is now my 50th year since this experience happened. So I'm going to explain it to you, but this will take a second to do this. So hold on.
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Be careful what you ask, Kevin. Now, this is a little poem, the first poem in the Tao Te Ching that I came across much later than this experience, but it's about this first poem. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. These two spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness, darkness within darkness, the gate of all mystery. So, in essence, that's Taoism in a nutshell. All right, here's what my experience was. I was living in a little apartment building in Beaverton, Oregon. And as anyone who's been in Oregon knows, Beaverton is one of the armpits of Oregon. So it's a nice enough little town, but it's a little town just outside, just west of Portland, and just part of the metro area. And I was laying in bed one night, just before going to sleep, and a storm was coming in, and it was coming from the east, which is a little unusual. So as the storm was coming in, it came in as a windstorm, and it was quite strong. I'll bet the wind was going 50 knots or so. And outside my apartment, there was a row of tall poplar trees on the edge of the property. And I couldn't see them, but I knew what they were doing because I had seen them earlier in the day. And they were swaying in the wind. But they were swaying in a particular pattern. All right? So these are very tall trees. And the wind is coming from this direction going here. So it's going right down that row of trees, all right, from east to west. And the trees were all going to be doing this. The wind would push them down until the natural flexibility within the trunks of the trees became stronger than the wind, and then the trees would come back. And then they would go like this again. And these were big trees. All right? These trees were 60, 70 feet tall. So they were doing this. And if you think about that, if you think about that motion, it's a sine wave. All right? If you graphed it out, the motion would be like this. All right? Like just a regular sine wave. However, if you take a sine wave, which just repeats the crest, repeats the trough, repeats the pattern, one after another, you could take every one of those sine waves and superimpose it over all the other ones. So what it makes is a circle. Is this clear? Yeah? In my mind, I realized that the sine wave stood in for time, but the circle stood in for eternity. And I went to sleep. No big deal. I went to sleep. And I woke up about 5 in the morning, and this experience happened. And I knew even when the experience was happening that it was the result of that thought. Why would it be the result of that thought? For me, that thought, that little bit of poetry, was exactly what they were talking about in that poem. That poem, that's the foundation poem for Taoism, explains the relationship between the relative and the absolute. That is the gate of all mystery. Realizing in yourself, not just as an intellectual exercise, but kind of, have you ever been skiing? Water skiing, waterboarding, skiing, any balancing thing, right? The first time you go out, it's going to be nuts and you're going to feel very, very, right? But when you finally get it, it's magic. You get it with your whole body. It's not an intellectual exercise. There's an intellectual part of it, of course, but right? It's a whole body, a whole being experience. And for me, might be very different for other people, but for me, that realization, that's simple, on the side of mathematics, it's the simplest thing in the world. It's a sine wave is simply a circle drawn out into a wave. So, all right. Though that's a high frequency sine wave. That's a circle. Which one is real? Is it this one that's real? Or is it this one that's real? Well, the truth is they're both real. If you look poetically at this, this drawn out over time becomes this. That's exactly what that poem is talking about. So, what happened for me was an activation of the root chakra, Kundalini rising, an activation of the 6th and 7th chakra, and then dropping down into the DANTIAN. This was a good 10 years before I ever really even heard of Tai Chi. I mean, I'd heard of Tai Chi, but before I did any Tai Chi or Qigong at all. Is having this experience of the chakras and the dantians activated.
So it was such a memorable, powerful thing that you put all this together in retrospect.
Yes. In essence, yes.
Yeah, when you knew literally what was going on.
Well, I believe me, I knew what was going on.
But you didn't know how to explain it at that.
Well, I could have told you, but you're right. I would not have had quite the same language.
A technical explanation.
I probably would not have had the exactly the language of relative and absolute, but that's what it amounts to. That's what that poem is talking about, which was written about 2,500 years ago now. They're talking about the relationship between the relative and the absolute. That they stem from the same, they appear to be completely different. Completely, utterly different. And yet they stem from the same source. How is that possible? What's the relationship between them? Listen to this poem again with modern ears.
Say the name of it again.
This is from the Tao Te Ching, which means the way and its virtue. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. What is eternal Tao? The eternal Tao is the absolute. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. You cannot put a name on it. Why can you not put a name on it? Because a name is a relative thing. So if you use a relative thing to describe an eternal thing, you've kind of destroyed both. That's why they call it the Tao. The word Tao in Chinese just means a path. A path. It's something you walk on. It's a way to walk. It's not a name. The nameless, that is the eternal, is the beginning of heaven and earth, of the universe. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things, that's the Wan Wu in Chinese, just means everything, all the stuff in our world, including ourselves. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. When you don't desire, it's possible to see the eternal mystery. It's possible. Doesn't mean you will, but it's possible. Ever desiring, one can only see the manifestations. Now, human beings are great apes, naked apes. So what's the one thing that apes do? They desire. They desire food, they desire social status, they desire sex, on and on and on and on. It's all about desire. So you don't see the eternal because you're busy focusing on desire. Even desiring to see the eternal blocks your view of the eternal. That's the truth. You cannot desire to see it and see it. These two spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness. This is something we don't understand. How can the eternal and the relative, which appear to be absolute opposites of each other, stem from the same source? Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. The Chinese word, xuan, mystery. All right? The point of it is, this experience prepared me for Tai Chi and Qigong. It didn't give me Tai Chi and Qigong. It was still a real struggle to get there. But it prepared me for it. And it's right there, available, if you just click your mind a few degrees and realize that the unchanging eternal, is the same thing as the changing mortal world. It's the same thing, seen from two different points of view. They describe that as a mystery within a mystery, and it is a mystery within a mystery, but it's still the truth. That's why I've always loved Taoism. Doesn't get into names and things. It just looks at the process. All right, what does that have to do with our DANTIAN? The simplest way to put this is all motion begins and ends with the DANTIAN. Why? Why does all motion begin here? This is the still point. This is the point that doesn't change, that doesn't move. If you're going to have any motion, it's only motion in relationship to something that is not moving. So you have to have a ground off which you move. And this is the place. Think about what this motion, this point right below the navel is. First of all, this is the place you came into the world. This is the place you were connected with your mother and your father. This is where you got your what's called your Yuan Qi. Y-U-A-N, Yuan. It means original. This is where you got your original Qi. Think about the name of the style of Tai Chi we do. Hun Yuan. This is where your Yuan Qi comes from, your Qi from your mother and father. By the time you're 50 or so, you've pretty well used it up. And Qigong was designed to supplement this Qi and to promote longevity, keep you healthy and strong and living a long time. Because you will use your Yuan Qi up. Right? So you have to supplement it with good food, good friends, good sleep, and exercise. That's what Qigong is for. Think about another aspect of it. This is your center of gravity. If you get into a pool of water and just lay on your back and just sort of lay there for a while and experiment around, you'll find out your center of gravity is right here. Now, it's a little different for different people. If you're terribly overweight, you may have some difficulties with that. If you're terribly underweight, you may. But if you're kind of in that normal range, you're going to find this is the center of gravity. This is also where your abdominal brain is. Did you know you have a second brain called the abdominal brain? It's 400 or 500 neurons packed into a very small little area, and it does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is act as the neuronic foundation of the Dantian proper. Years ago, I was explaining this in one of our classes, and somebody asked me, well, you know, is it real? Like, if they dissected you, would they find your Dantian in here? And I said, well, no, they won't find a physical object. But is it real? Yes, it's real. Well, how is it? If it's not physical, how can it be real? Think about the earth. This is how I got onto earth body, your body. Think about the earth. It has a center of gravity. Toward that center of gravity, everything in the earth relates, everything is dropping to that center of gravity. It's not quote unquote real. There's no brass ball down there, but there is a place where all that energy meets. That's the Earth's center of gravity. Now, since the Earth is constantly deforming itself, that center of gravity actually moves. And maybe the same thing happens down here. Is it real? Yeah. Is it physical? No, it's energetic. But that's still real. So the same thing is true of this. This is your center. Out from this center, you grow. You literally grew as a fetus. And now you grow energetically. So one aspect of this center is to act as what in China they call a burner. And by burner, they mean a little charcoal burner that you cook your steaks on and have dinner. It has a dynamic function of cooking basic energy. That basic energy is called Jing, J-I-N-G. Right? And what does it cook it into? It cooks it into a kind of steam. And that steam is what we call Qi. So the word Qi is actually, in part, the picture of a bowl with steam coming off it. That's the bowl. The steam comes off. So it has that function of taking basic metabolic energy and changing it into a higher, more refined form of energy called Qi. There's another function higher up that takes the Qi energy and changes it into something called Shun, S-H-E-N. We call that spirit. So biological energy turns to the energy of motion, which turns into the energy of the spirit. Right, so 3 levels of energy in the body. And this is one of the main cooking places. All right. The area of the cooking for Shun kind of depends on what system you're using, is either the heart or the third eye or both. The word for intention in Chinese is Xin Yi. Xin means your heart. Yi means your mind. Xin Yi means your heart mind. You don't just think with this. You don't just feel with this. It's both of them at once. So here's one, here's the other. Jing, Qi, Shun. Being aware of that helps you work with that. All right? Just being aware that that's what's going on helps you work with it a little bit. Don't do things that get in the way of it. Do things that kind of help the process. So, one aspect of dealing with your DANTIAN as the center of your being is to relate to it. Right? To mentally relate to it, which means you're bringing your crown chakra and your third eye, you're bringing the upper chakras into relationship with the third chakra. Right? How do you do that? That's what we do in meditation. It's the entire point of standing meditation, well, pretty much the entire point, is to focus everything on the DANTIAN. Master Zhang used to say, he learned a little English. Inside, inside, inside. I heard this so many times, guys. I can copy exactly what he sounded like. Inside, inside, inside. You look DANTIAN. You listen DANTIAN. You smell DANTIAN. You taste DANTIAN. Feel DANTIAN. That's what you do. That's all you do. But think about that. What he's saying is you put your consciousness, not just your mental consciousness, but your body consciousness, on the DANTIAN. The consciousness is energy. You are feeding energy into the DANTIAN just by looking at it. When Grandmaster Feng began his serious training at age 19 with Grandmaster Hu, he was required to do standing meditation focused on the DANTIAN 2 hours every morning for 11 years. This is serious training. This is like Buddhist training. Right? But if you don't happen to have 2 hours every morning and you don't have 11 years, you can still do it when you do Qigong in 2 different ways. One is, remember to keep your mind on your DANTIAN always. It doesn't matter what you're doing. part of your mind should be aware of this. Keep your mind on the DANTIAN. Another way is when we do those 3 circles. What are those 3 circles about? Well, a lot of things. But one thing is, it's about returning to the DANTIAN. Pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention. One of the few times I saw Master Zhang actually get a little impatient with his class. Our classes were very loose. The Taoist way of doing stuff is not military style. It's much more organic. But it's still serious. And I think everybody was just sort of fooling around. It was Master Zhang's classes were so big. He would have 5 or 6 different groups doing different things. The beginners were over here, the super advanced people were over here, some of the really advanced people were teaching some of the people who were just coming up. There were different levels, and some people were doing swords, some people were doing sabers, some people were just learning the very first form that I'm teaching in the Tai Chi class now, etc., etc. We always met at the beginning and did an hour of Qigong together, and then we would split up and do this stuff. And everybody was just kind of talking. They weren't really paying attention. And he just, bam, his hands together, and he went, pay attention. Pay attention, pay attention. This is gold. That's a Chinese phrase. Comparing things to gold in China is important. This is real. It's just as real as Buddha's chanting. Pay attention. Don't be wandering off talking about the movie you saw last night. Or that you're going to go to the beach this afternoon. Right. This afternoon, go to the beach. Pay attention to the beach. But now pay attention to this. When you do these 3 circles, it's not a grim attention. It's very light. And even if we do that for a minute, what you're doing is touching on your still point, which is an absolute point that never changes. All right, if I've got an absolute point that never changes, and Kevin's got an absolute point that never changes, and Catherine's got an absolute point that never changes, how can you have 3 different absolutes? You can't. There's only one absolute. Because if there's more than one, now they're relative. Now they're in relationship to each other. That's what relative means. They are relatives. They are relating to each other. So that can't be true. There can only be one absolute in the entire universe. So my absolute point, in fact, must be the same as your absolute point. And our absolute points, our shared absolute points, must be the same as the universal absolute point. You are touching on the absolute point of the universe. That's the eternal Tao. You can't give it a name. You can talk about it, but it's kind of like pointing at the moon. You see the moon? Don't pay attention to the finger. Pay attention to the moon. When you do this so casually, you're touching the absolute center of the universe again. And I mean that literally. That's why all motion begins from that point. Of course, all motion begins from that point. All growth, all motion, the whole 10,000 things, everything begins from that point. That's not doctrine, it's just logic if you think about it. If you know anything about modern science, you will know that modern science is hoist on its own petard, because modern science is completely built on relativity theory. On the other hand, you've got quantum theory, and the two can't fit together. And the reason they can't fit together is they have no absolute point to bring those into relationship. And they're eventually going to have to figure that out and work with it, but fortunately we're not scientists, right? We're just motion. Okay, I want to do some exercises with this, but we are done with this hour. So let's take a 10-minute break until 10:15. And then let's come back and we're going to do some exercises to become more aware of and work with the Dantian. Meditation, Qigong, Tai Chi. Okay, we'll see you in 10 minutes. So, Grandmaster Feng used to say, Hunyan, this is pretty much a quote, Hunyan Tai Chi includes both motion and stillness, but it gives precedence to stillness. So what does that mean? Catherine, what does that mean?
That you always have to go back to stillness. That stillness is the most important when you start the movement, when you end the movement.
Yeah. You have to touch on that still point. The truth is you should always be in touch with that still point. That's what they really mean by grounding. Grounding is yes, it's the ground itself. That's the physical aspect of it. But the metaphysical aspect is you always touch on the Tao. You touch on this still point. You never leave that still point. It gives precedence to that because that comes first. Everything grows out of that. Motion grows out of stillness, not the other way around. So you pay attention to the stillness. The way of paying attention to stillness formally, the root exercise for both Qigong and Tai Chi is standing meditation. All right? It's called Jian Zhuang. Jian Zhuang, Z-H-A-N Z-H-U-A-N-G. All right? Jian Zhuang. It means standing like a post, standing like a tree. Often you'll see folks doing this exercise in relationship to a tree. So they'll stand, you know, in front, there's a tree there. They'll stand in front of the tree and do this exercise. Why? Because the tree's your teacher. The tree knows more about this than you do. All right, you're a mobile animal. You're always moving. You need to stand in relationships to something that's not moving, or is moving in a different way than you, and absorb some of that. Find that vibe and incorporate that in your being, in your awareness. So when you do standing meditation, let's do a little bit. I'll teach you the physical things that you need to know to do this. But the important thing you need to know is just to relax. Shake it out, shake the tension out, right? Relax. It's not about, I've seen people do standing meditation like this. That's not going to work. That's stiffness. Any place in your body that's stiff means your mind is caught in that place that's stiff. That's what's stiff, is your mind. Your body's not stiff. Shake it around. It's not stiff. If it's stiff, it's because you're stiffening it up. Maybe unconsciously stiffening it up, but you're stiffening it up. So you want to let go of that. So the basic idea is always the same. It's a high horse stance. So your toes are not square straight ahead. They open a little bit. Your knees open a little bit, left and right. Maybe just a very little bit, but a little bit. It's just relax. Flex your knees, not bend your knees. It's not like this, right? Just a little flex. Open your pelvis, open your hip joints, and let your dantian relax in there. Right? Feel your spine from the base of the spine to the top of the head. Now there's something that is helpful to do that really we're not going to talk about until next week. And that is, you need to get a circulation going on inside the body. There's a very simple metaphor for this, and that actually a tree does it. A tree has two circulatory systems, xylem and phloem. One brings water from the roots up into the leaves, up to the height. The other brings food that's being created by the sunlight down to the roots. So one is coming up, the other is going down. And they're both going on all the time, and they're both happening at the same time. That's what you should feel like inside. Something's coming up from your feet to the top of your head. Something's coming from the top of your head down to your feet. Right? They're very gentle movements. You don't have to do anything, just sort of feel it. Right? Relax your shoulders. Relax your elbows. Relax your wrists. Now, there are different postures for this. We're going to do a very simple one, but postures everywhere from here. A very common one is here, hugging the tree with the palms pointed at the dantian. Well, what we're going to do is take the palms pointed at the dantian and just place them on the dantian. So the Laogong acupuncture point, right, more or less in the center of the palm, it's a little bit toward the index finger, goes on the dantian proper, and then the Laogong of the other hand goes on top of that Laogong. And now, just relax your arms completely. Relax your shoulders and elbows. And focus internally, focus on the dantian, and just rest in that focus. Don't let your stance become static. Let yourself just sway in the breeze naturally. So your weight may shift from foot to foot or move forward. It may shift forward or shift back.
Does it matter which hand is on your dantian and which hand isn't?
Technically, woman is right hand first, left hand second. Men are just the opposite, left hand first, right hand second. However, since I'm right handed, I always end up doing right hand first. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that was 5 minutes. I feel much calmer after 5 minutes of meditation. It's a good idea to work up a practice where you meditate for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes before class. Because when you come in, you won't have the heebie-jeebies that you have out on the street. You know the phrase, to jump out of your own skin? That's the way we are most of the time. We're full of static because we've been on a computer, or we're watching TV, or we're doing work, or we're running here, or we're doing that. Do you know that phrase, Catherine? To jump out of your own skin. So one of the things that meditation does for you with Tai Chi and Qigong is to bring you back into your own skin and just settle down and be quiet. And now when you do meditation and you do your Tai Chi, it's much more real because you're altogether there. So that's maybe the most important exercise. It's not maybe, that is the most important exercise in Tai Chi and Qigong. Is just standing meditation. There are great Tai Chi masters in China who do nothing else. That's all they do, is just meditate. Quiet down. However, gotta go, Kevin, we'll see you. However, there are other aspects of the Dantian that are equally important. So, movement. When you think about movement, you're moving through the 3 dimensions of space. All right? X, Y, and Z. Now, the truth is, when you move, it's always some combination of those. And the movements are infinite in variety. Nevertheless, you can break them down to those 3 very simple dimensions. Front to back, side to side, and level. So if you've got a nice Tai Chi wooden ball, all right, you can move the ball forward, you can move the ball back. You can turn it to the left, you can turn it to the right, or you can spin it level to the left or the right. Those are the 3 dimensions. And that's how you move through them. The Dantian is a ball, is a sphere. And if I want to move forward, I roll that ball forward. If I want to move back, I roll it back. If I want to move left, I roll it left. If I want to move right, right? If I want to go level, in either direction. Those are the 3 simplest cases. And you will notice, if you pay attention, that in Qigong in particular, all our exercises have to do with those 3 simple directions. Because once you get those 3 directions, everything else follows. So we might do an exercise like the belly exercise, rolling forward, back, up the back, through at the just above the Dantian, down the front, underneath. Up to the solar plexus, through, down the front, under the, right? Now, when we do the exercise, it might look something like this. And I'm going to move up close enough you won't see my feet, but right? You might just see this. Very simple. When we do the Fang Zhong Gong, you're rolling the ball forward. It's not the only thing you're doing, but that's the basis of everything else. If you put both hands together, roll it forward. Or roll it backward. So why is this point so important for movement? If you move from the center, everything else is going to just naturally move with it. You don't have to think about it. All right? I'm going to roll from the center. Look, everything is rolling. My shoulders, my ankles, my knees, my elbows, my wrists, my entire back, everything's rolling. I'm not thinking about it. It's just happening. Where if I just think about my shoulder, well, it's not the same. It doesn't roll everything. But if I roll my shoulder by rolling my dantian, oh, now everything's engaged again. Move from the center. Or forward. All right, those front to back circles are called Li circles, L-I. Li. All right? So that's like one pure circle. Now, rarely do you get an absolutely pure circle. More in Qigong you do, but it's relatively rare in Tai Chi, but it does happen. But it's always a component. All right? What about side-to-side circles? Roll the dantian. These kind of Qigong circles, I'm actually using my hands to express what's going on inside and also to encourage what is going on inside. Now, when you do side to side, it's a good place to check and make sure that you don't have a flat tire. A flat tire means you're constricted in the pelvis. And so what happens is you kind of come over and then it goes clonk and you go straight across and you go clonk and straight across. You want to make sure that the tire is round. Round. And it's got a round bottom on it. And what that means is you have to sink in the qua. You have to sink in the hip joint. I'm going to sink in the blue and then roll under, sink in the red. Sink in the blue, sink in the red. Okay, now it's round. And reverse. Now, if I'm going to sink in the red quad, I actually need to sink all the way down to the bottom of the foot. The way Master Zhang would describe this is every movement all the way. Every movement goes all the way down to the ground. And then down to the ground on the right. You're touching on the ground. It's called sinking. 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 It's very easy to go beyond that mentally. I'm just going to focus on this, and I don't even mentally touch the ground. If you don't mentally touch the ground, you will not touch the ground energetically. You may touch it physically, but you're not touching it energetically. Every movement all the way. This is the main reason Tai Chi is done slowly, because every movement includes touching the ground. This is practice. So touch the ground. They give you a little time. You move slowly. Touch the ground. Touch the ground on the other side. Touch the ground. And then reverse. When you're doing the Tai Chi form, in every movement there's 8 or 10 or a dozen places where you touch the ground, first on one side or the other. So you do the form slowly to give yourself time to remember and touch and let it happen. All right? What I mean is this. All right? Your energy is the blue sand. And the blue sand just takes time to drop down to the ground. So you give it time. You do the form slowly so that your chi sinks to the ground. All right, what about level? Touch the ground in the blue. Touch the ground in the red. The blue. The red. And reverse. When you actually learn Tai Chi, when you learn the form, or you are learning the form, you're going to learn much more complex movements than these simple X, Y, and Z movements. The reason that Grandmaster Feng invented Hunyan Tai Chi was to bring a lot of Qigong into the learning process. Because it's very difficult to get these basics just in Tai Chi. There's too much going on. That's one move. Oh man, there's so much going on. There's so much going on, you can't see the basics. Tai Chi is a much more advanced version. So you need to practice the Qigong in order to get the basics on which a movement like that is built. The basics are much more important than all the fancy stuff that comes later. So I tell you what, grab your sticks. Front to back circles. Lee circles. Right, roll the DANTIAN. And reverse. All right. Now roll the DANTIAN backwards. When you're doing these stick exercises, that's what you're focusing on, is the DANTIAN motion. Shoe circles. All right. Now roll the DANTIAN. And reverse. All right. Roll the DANTIAN backwards. All right. Right to left. Sink in the red, sink in the blue, sink in the red, sink in the blue. And then if you turn the DANTIAN level, sink in the red, sink in the blue, sink in the red, sink in the blue. And reverse. Sink in the blue, sink in the red, sink in the blue, sink in the red. Good. Okay, put your sticks away. Now, did you notice something? Let's say you're doing the Lee circles, right? So I'm doing back to front circles, forward Lee circles. Right? The Dantian's turning, your hands turning. What connects your Dantian to your hands? Your head, yes. But energetically. There are energy channels inside the body that bring the energy of the Dantian out to the various parts of the body. Might be the elbows, might be the knees. Right? We'll talk about those next week. Right? But there's four main energy channels that we use. Maybe 7, depending on how you count. Okay, let's look at Tai Chi a little bit. When you do the first movement of the form, it looks like this. At least that's how we do it in Hunyuan Tai Chi. That's 3 Li circles followed by 2 Shu circles followed by 1 Ping circle. So in the first movement of the form, you are practicing those basic X, Y, and Z axes, and they're almost pure. As you go on in the form, they're going to become far more hybrid. But at this beginning, this first move, they're deliberately very simple. Right. Reversely circle and push out. Forwardly circle and pull down. Reversely circle and press down. Clockwise Shu circle and push out. Counterclockwise Shu circle and press down. And a clockwise Ping circle, and now you move into the second form. It's really critical to understand the components of whatever it is you're doing. Because without that, how do you know what to do? How do you talk about it with your teacher or your classmates? Oh, well, I move here and I do this and do that. No, you talk about, I'm doing a clockwise Shu circle. What should I do with my right qua, for instance? All right? It's just understanding the basic vocabulary of this movement. There's a guy I've been watching on YouTube. He's a professional batting coach for baseball, meaning he's teaching folks that are, so sorry, we've lost. Okay, there it is. He teaches Major League Baseball players how to hit a baseball. And you think, well, that's the simplest thing in the world. And it's because everybody thinks that they don't bat very well. Watch, I'm going to hit a baseball. Here comes a baseball. What kind of circle was that? Kevin, what kind of circle was that?
It looked like a ping.
It looks like a ping circle. It's a level circle. However, that's not how you hit a baseball. All right? Look at the best baseball players in the world. That's not what they do. What they do is much closer to a golf drive. It's this. Right? What kind of circle is that?
Shoot.
It's a shoe circle. Now, this guy does not have that language. And even if he had the language, he would have to teach it to these guys because they don't have the language. He can't just say, look, guys, it's not a ping circle, it's a shoe circle. That would be like, oh, of course. It's not Taoist dogma. It's just body mechanics. It's the way our bodies work. The reason that we do so much Qigong when you're trying to learn Tai Chi is because that's where you practice the basics. And then once you conquer the basics and you really start to get this stuff, then you can bring it into your Tai Chi and really do something with it. Do you all know who Marta Argerich is? Now you got to stay 2 more minutes. You know who Marta Argerich is, the Argentinian pianist. Every single day she does finger exercises on the piano for an hour. It's the same thing. That's her Qigong. You don't see her do that. You see her play Rachmaninoff or Bach or Mozart, right? But what she does to prepare for that is her Qigong. Okay, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.